you probably know what is centralized logging, and you want to build log stream pipelines. We already had an episode on Fluentbit. Today, this episode is dedicated to Fluentd. Welcome to Is It Observable? The main objective of Is It Observable is to provide tutorials on how to observe a given technology. Today's episode is a part of the Kubernetes series, but it's specific to logging. In the logging theme, we already had one episode presenting Loki and Promtail. We did another episode on Fluentbit. Today, we are going to focus this episode on the big brother of Fluentbit, Fluentd. So let's see what you're going to learn out of this episode. So first, we are going to do a presentation on Fluentd. We're going to see how to parse files, how to deploy Fluentd in a Kubernetes cluster, and we will then create a tutorial mixing Fluentbit and Fluentd with the presentation of Fluentd. Like explained in the episode on Fluentbit, Fluentd is the sister or brother of Fluentbit. Similar to Fluentbit, it is composed of several plugins. So you have naturally the input plugins to collect logs, output plugins to export logs, and many plugins that will help us to filter, parse, format, and way more. So let's see. Input plugins. They are made to define several sources of logstream. So in our environment, we also mentioned that before, we have several components producing logs. So database servers, of course, applications that will write logs into std out, or maybe even to an HTTP endpoint. We have the web server logs, the load balancer logs, and we have more. So in Fluentd, the major advantage is that there are so many plugins, and especially in the input plugins. So you should clearly pay attention to Fluentd's documentations where you will see all those plugins. So tail is probably the one that you are going to use heavily. Tail will read logs from a file. HTTP plugin in this is the plugin that will basically receive logs from applications. And then you have forward. Forward will be utilized in our example. Forward is built to receive logs from other log stream pipeline coming from Fluentbit or Fluentd. You have other input plugins like TCP, UDP, syslogs, executions, and way more. So when using the input plugin, you will see that it's important to use tags. Tags is a concept that will help us to design and build our pipeline. In fact, if you pay attention to the Fluentbit episode, we briefly mentioned the notion of tags. So what can you do with tags? Basically, depending on the source of our logs, the structure could be different. Some application will produce JSON format, the other pure text or XML. So therefore, with the help of tag, we can basically apply the right parser, the right filter to the data source that we are trying to transform. You can also precise the destination of your log stream based on tags. Let's say I'm collecting Kubernetes logs, and those logs I want to send it over to Dynatrace, or I want to send it over the logs coming from the HR proxy to Elasticsearch. So tags will allow you to precise what to do with your log stream. You can, of course, because it's a log collector and forwarder, you can transform your logs using filter, parser, formatter plugin. So we'll see that once you start playing around, you will see the value of all of those plugins. Now, there's also, we mentioned, output plugins. So output is basically, we want to send logs to an endpoint, to a log stream storage, or to another Fluentd, for example. And there are so many plugins in the Fluentd community. So you can store it in Mongo database, Kafka, Elasticsearch, stdout. stdout is a plugin. We already used it with Fluentbit. It's useful when you have to debug HTTP and more. One of the main advantages of Fluentd is the large number of plugins built by the community that is making Fluentd so much powerful and popular. I'm pretty sure that Fluentbit will have a similar journey with many plugins, but as of now, Fluentd has obviously more plugins. So if you don't find any input or output or formatter or whatever plugins related to what you have to achieve, then check out the community because potentially there is already a plugin built by someone in the contrib repository. The other powerful feature is that Fluentd has a Prometheus plugin that allows us to expose metrics related to a logstream pipeline in a Prometheus format. I mean, similar to Fluentbit, of course, you can extract, transform, collect a metric and then expose it also in a Prometheus format, but at least Fluentd is also giving us naturally the option to expose specific observability metrics related to our pipeline. For example, we can export metrics using forward output plugin and use Prometheus to generate counters reporting the number of records that we have forwarded. You can see that you can also add labels to your Prometheus metrics. So in this example, we will receive logs from another Fluentd or Fluentbit pipeline because forward is the objective. And we could basically transform the data, and here we do a Prometheus. So we are going to build a counter counting the number of logstream forwarded. So let's see how to parse a file. So let's take an example of a useful use case. So let's say we want to collect logs from our HR proxy ingress controllers. I mean, everyone here in the communities will use either a service mesh or ingress controllers. So it makes sense to also report a couple of indicators. So why, first of all, do we want to look at logs? Because HR proxy potentially is exposing metrics naturally in a Prometheus format. Usually in those logs, there is a lot of more details, and maybe we could take advantage of these details. So let's see how we can parse the HR proxy logs. The logs of HR proxy usually looks like this. So there are a lot of information. You can see we can recognize some dates, some process ID, and more. So if we pay attention to the structure here, there's the process name here. You have the process ID, the severity, the IP address, the port, the date and time, the server, and then a couple of statistics like the number of bytes, the active connections, the connection to HR proxy, connection to the backend, the server connections, and so on. So, which means if we know this structure and we can recognize that structure, we can easily imagine a regular expression that will match the right pattern. So this is the regular expression. So I'm not going to in details in what this expression means, but typically I'm extracting the details that I just described. So at the end, we can build a logstream pipeline collecting the logs using the input plugin tail, because it will read from a file. And then we will format the logs using our regular expression. So we extract the various content, we can tag it So then we know that's come from HR proxy, and then we could basically structure by adding some times, some labels, and we can forward somewhere else. So here is an example. So we use a tail input plugin. We precise, of course, the path to the log file, the positioning file as well. Remember, we mentioned about positioning is very important in case your Fluentd agent just is killed. Once you will restart, it will look at this position file. Then we use format. Format will basically we expect a specific format of our logs, and then if it's the case, we can tag. It will tag with HR proxy TCP, and then we can also add a time format to this log stream. So if we want to forward these logs to std out to test, we could add the following structure to our pipeline. Just a simple type std out. I don't have to do much. It will be sent to the logs of our logstream pipeline to Fluentd. So how to deploy Fluentd in a Kubernetes cluster? So Fluentd in a Kubernetes world will be deployed as a daemon set. So it means one pod per node. And each of those nodes will collect the logs from the various nodes. Then, of course, we will have to build our logstream pipeline by adding the context, the structure, where we want to forward it, what is the input, and so on. So this logstream pipeline in reality is a configuration file. So most of the deployment that you can find over internet of Fluentd is using still this configuration file. So the most recommended approach is to transform the usage of a configuration file into the usage of a config map. Much more easier to maintain, to deploy, and so on. In the case of Kubernetes, we already seen it with the first episode on Loki. All our pods are generating logs by sending the details in std out. So we saw that the Docker engine takes what is available in std out and generates a standardized location to collect the logs. So if you use Fluentd in a Kubernetes environment, so we will probably use tail to collect the various logs generated by our pods. If you use log Fluentd in your cluster, you will have to add the following part in your logstream pipeline. So type tail, the path to the containers, the position file, and you will have to also adjust the time format. And of course, similar to what we explained before, you should definitely tag your source to then easily transform it. So if you're going to use Fluentd in a Kubernetes cluster, you are going to use this repository, Fluentd Kubernetes daemon set. In this repo, you will see that there is different type of deployment based on the various plugins available. So you can see that there is Elasticsearch and many others. But note that you will have a specific container image that will include some predefined plugins, which means the current repository is providing predefined image on a couple of plugins. So Elasticsearch, CloudWatch, Forward, GCS, Graylog, Kafka, and Kinesis, Azure Blob, Loggly, and many others. If your target plugin does not provide any image, you will probably have to build it by yourself. So I would then recommend to build your new Fluentd image by an existing image built by the community. In my case, in my example, because I need the plugin Forward, because I want to chain Fluentbit and Fluentd, I will build my image from the image containing the Forward plugin. The idea is to make sure that you have enough plugins in your image to achieve your pipeline. So try to figure out what type of actions you want to achieve to transform your logs, to collect the logs, and of course to send it somewhere, to identify the right plugins. Once you have identified those, you can build your image by installing all those plugins step by step. So in our tutorial, we'll see, I will walk through the journey of building your own custom Fluentd image. You will see it's very easy, nothing much to deal with. But then to allow Fluentd to run in a stable environment, we will have to make sure that we give the root permissions to a couple of folders. So /var/log, we need to read writes because this is where we're going to collect our container logs. Then we mentioned before with a positioning file, so we need obviously the permissions to write in that folder. The objective of this tutorial is to install Fluentd and collect logs from our cluster and forward it to Dynatrace. This will be our exercise. So to achieve that, there are several steps that will be required. Of course, we need Dynatrace tenant, so you can start trial. Then you will see that to receive logs in Dynatrace, there is a log ingest API. And the log ingest API in Dynatrace is exposed in an ActiveGate. So you can either install your ActiveGate in a bare metal technology like a VMware or a server, or you can also deploy it in a Kubernetes cluster. And today what we're going to do is going to deploy this ActiveGate in our cluster.
So like every episode that we produce for Is It Observable, there is always a GitHub repository with all the steps that we are going to follow for this tutorial. So here you can see it's the GitHub repository for the episode related to Fluentd. Similar to the previous episodes, we are going to utilize a Kubernetes cluster. So in my case, I use a GKE cluster. So if you want to use Minikube or Rancher or any others, you are free to do so. There is nothing specific related to Google. It's just that for me it's easier. So I won't go through the steps of building the cluster, of deploying Istio, deploying Prometheus and Grafana. So they are in the as a requirement in this tutorial. So you will have first a cluster required. Then we will deploy Istio because we're going to use Istio for doing this as a service mesh in the cluster. And then once we have deployed Istio, we will deploy as usual the hipster shop, and we will create the right gateway to expose the hipster shop out of the cluster. We do the same, then we deploy Prometheus, the latest version of Prometheus, and that has, of course, Grafana. And to make sure that we expose Grafana out of the cluster, we will also create the right rules in Istio. So once that is fully done, then you can jump to the step where you will basically install Fluentd and do all the exercise related to this tutorial. So if you have not started, if you don't have any Dynatrace tenant, it's not a big deal. So you can go to dynatrace.com/trial and you can put your email address here, start a free trial, and you will receive an email with your dedicated tenant. So what is important? So I'm going to show you here. I have a tenant which is in the dev tenant. So it doesn't change much. It may have more features, but what is important here is in the top here you see there's a URL. What is important is you need to from your trial you will have a live tenant, so an id.live.dynatrace.com. So note that ID somewhere because we will need it later on during this tutorial. Then in the tutorial there's two things, because we're going to deploy the ActiveGate. Like I mentioned, the log ingest API of Dynatrace is exposed on the ActiveGate, so we will have to deploy an ActiveGate. So to do so, there is several ways of doing it. So here you can either go to the deploy Dynatrace on the left side menu, and you will see here there is an option to say install FactiveGate to extend monitoring. So you can do that, but keep in mind this is going basically to suggest a deployment on Windows, Linux, Kubernetes, of course, for in your case, but we won't go through this UI to deploy it. I have a manifest file to deploy in Kubernetes, but basically here, if you want to do it on the Linux servers, hosting somewhere else, or on a Docker image, whatever, you can do so with the Linux or Windows installation. Two things are required to deploy Fluentd in Dynatrace. So the first thing is we need what we called to create tokens. And one of the token is the platform has a service token. So in the integration section of Dynatrace, you will see that there are, we will have to create the Dynatrace API token later. But the one I need first is the platform as a service. So go to that section and generate a fresh new token. Note that down because you will need it to deploy Fluentd. So this will be required. And the second thing that we need, so is the Dynatrace API token. So I already have created it here. You see I have a Fluentd token available. And if I expand it, if I can create a new one if you want. So the only rights that I need to ingest logs from Fluentd is obviously the rights on the API v2, and I want to ingest logs. So that will be the minimal right for this use case. If we want to extend further and include OpenTelemetry traces, you will have to also enable that right. And if you want to ingest metrics, there is also a right for this one. So if you, but in our exercise, I will basically just one right with the ingest logs will be enough. So that's the first part. So start a fresh new Dynatrace tenant, generate your platform as a service token, and last, generate the Dynatrace API token.
Then we will need to build the Docker container using Fluentd with the Dynatrace output plugin.
So now that we have our token, our pass token, our Dynatrace URL and everything, the second thing that we need is to generate the Docker container. So like explained here in the Fluentd repo, there is a specific project for deploying Fluentd in a Kubernetes daemon set. And you will see that there are several examples. So you see with Debians, with including several plugins here. So either in x86 or in ARM64. So there is plenty of various image here. So in my case, what I decided, I wanted to have a multi-arc image and I just wanted the forward. So I picked the forward plugin here, the image related to the forward. So, and then there are a few examples, but we are not going to use those ones because we are going to basically include the daemon, the config map, change slightly the deployment. So to the next step now we need is, once we have the image of a reference, we need to build the Docker image that will include our Dynatrace image. Or plugin, I would say. So just to let you know, so in the Dynatrace OSS, so OSS stands for open source, there's a Fluent plugin, and there is a specific folder here where you explain how to deploy it. It's not providing any image, but I will show you here. And I have prepared Docker files in the repo available in GitHub. As you can see, I'm taking the base image with the forward plugin, and then I just run a few installations to include the Ruby packages. So I need Dynatrace, I want the Kubernetes metadata, and yeah, so I'm installing all the various plugins. So in your case, if you need any specific other plugins, then you will have to do the same thing. So to build the Docker container, it's very easy. So I'm going to open a command line, which is here. I have the command line here. You can do it with a CI/CD process. You're very free about this. So I'm going to jump into the folder having my Docker image and Docker file. So it's in the Fluentd folder. Let me check. I got my Docker file here. So the only thing I need to do is the Docker build. Then I'm gonna dot, because that will reference to the local Docker files in that folder. And then I need to put some tags. So we can imagine to name it like, is it observable? And then we can say Fluentd Dynatrace. And then we can put a version, so it's 0.1. Here it is. So here I'm just building this. And you will see he will go get the image, install all the various packages in the Ruby format. So now I have that fresh new container that has been built. The only thing I need to do to take advantage of that fresh new image is to push it to a Docker registry. So in my case, I will push it to Docker Hub. I already have done it, by the way.
We will first use Fluentd to collect the logs and forward it to Dynatrace.
Now that we have our container and our various token, the only thing that I just forgot to do is to get the cluster ID. Because we need to define the cluster in Dynatrace once the cluster will be registered through the active gate. So I'm going to just copy that line here to get the my cluster ID. So you can do the same thing on your end. I got it. And now I can note that down, that ID, because I will need it later on. This is required to deploy the active gate. So this is a required step, so don't forget to do it as well. So now that we have our cluster ID and all tokens and our image, what we will need to do is to deploy a service account. So I've already in the Fluentd folder, I have a service account in manifest file that will technically create the Dynatrace namespace and include all the cluster role and the role binding. So that will create a service account, of course, but for this specific namespace. So let's deploy this one. So that will create our namespace in Dynatrace. So let's deploy this file here. So it's located in the Fluentd folder, like I mentioned before. Here we have the service account. So we just have to do a kubectl apply of that file, and that will create our namespace and our service account. Done. So now we have our service account created. So now you can see this next section. We need all the various information that we've collected so far. So your environment URL, like I mentioned, it's going to be without the HTTPS and HTTP, in your Dynatrace tenant, you have an id.live.dynatrace.com. So that would be your environment URL. Then you need the cluster ID, your from Kubernetes with the help of the command that we just executed a few seconds ago. We need the pass token, the API token, and we need the environment ID. Remember, the first section of your Dynatrace URL is the environment ID. So run those commands, and then we will be able to edit to create secrets in the right Dynatrace namespace, because we will need those secrets. And once those secrets has been created, we will update two files, the Fluentd manifest files and the Fluentd active gate. So let me briefly show you those two files, so then you can understand what's going to do inside of those files. So the first one is the active gate. So the active gate, like I said, is the component that will be running in your cluster, and that will be able to ingest the the various log streams and send it back to Dynatrace. So the other thing that we need here is you can see the active gate image need obviously to point to your Dynatrace environment, and it's using a couple of secrets and config. So you need to refer to those for sure. You need a cluster ID as well. You will see that. So that's why we need to create a config map. So I'll show you in a few seconds the config map I'm referring to in Fluentd. So the ActiveGate is mainly referring to your environment ID. And if we jump down now to the Fluentd manifest, you can see here I have obviously my config map. So here instead of a Fluentd configuration file, I have it included in a config map, and I have two variables side of that. I have the cluster ID that will be replaced by my set command, and I have the ActiveGate URL, which it's going to be static because it's the image that we deploy, but we still need the environment ID here to be replaced. So this needs to be done through the set command. Here is our pipeline, but we will see it in a few seconds. And at the end, we use the exported Dynatrace. So this is going to be seen in a few seconds. So let's run those set commands. And once we have executed those commands, I will apply and deploy Fluentd. So now that we have created our secrets and updated our deployment files, so the Fluentd manifest file and the ActiveGate, we just simply have to deploy them. So we kubectl apply -f, and in the Fluentd directory there is the first. Let's deploy the ActiveGate. All right, so this has been created. Now that we have deployed this one, let's deploy now the Fluentd daemon set. All right, so let's have a look at the namespaces. Okay, so let's see our pods running in the Dynatrace namespace. We have our 3 pods running, so the ActiveGate and the 3 Fluentd pods, 1 per node. So let's take one and see the logs that we are currently having now on this one. So we already have a pipeline. The pipeline is basically, so here, what it says, sent to Dynatrace. So it seems to run. It was the first errors we had is was related to the ActiveGate that was not officially started, but now since the ActiveGate is started, now it seems that there is an interaction between Fluentd and Dynatrace. So that's done. The only missing part that we need to do, so the last step that we need is to connect the ActiveGate to the Dynatrace tenant. In fact, it's already connected. It's just that you can see it's registered. So you will have to run those 2 commands. One is to get the API URL, and the other one is to get the beer token related to the API. So you will have to go to Settings, Cloud Virtualization, Kubernetes. Let's do this. So settings, where is it? Here, settings, cloud and virtualizations and Kubernetes. Here it is. And we can add connect to a new cluster. So if I do a connect to a new cluster, so you'll have to put your API URL, the token, and enable a few of the options to let Dynatrace monitor automatically. And now I can connect. So now by doing this, you will see it's connecting to the API server. And my mistake. You need to remove the SSL handshake. It's a demo, so it's not a production environment. But you should also disable this one. So I'm gonna connect. So now I've been connected, and now let's see in a few seconds. All right, so now we have our new tutorial cluster that has been added here. So now, if you want to see, logs are obviously coming in. So what I could do here to see the logs, I could basically jump into the log section. So here in the menu, there is a log sections. So to see the logs, you have to click on logs here. So here is the log viewer screen. And now, because I have 2 clusters running, I have logs coming from those two environments, so I may need to create the right filters to see only the logs related to our tutorial. So what I would do here, I will look at the nodes. So here is it observable? So let me grab those ones. Here it is. Now I only have the logs from this those nodes, and those has been added the last 30 minutes. So this is obviously the one coming from Fluentbit. So let me just confirm. So here you can see the log stream, and you can see that here it's obviously our cluster that we just added recently. So ingesting logs with Fluentd works very, very well. So no major issue. You see it's very easy. So then if you want to take advantage of this, you can obviously create the right filters, extract more data, and then create metrics out of those logs to create any dashboarding, similar to what we did the other day with Loki. So before we jump to the second exercise, let's see in details the pipeline that we are currently running here. So this is the pipeline that is currently running. So it's basically here as a source, similar to what we explained before. It's connecting tail and the logs from the container logs on the nodes. And I have two parse. To basically, one is to check on JSON format, and then we also have regular expressions to be able to extract the std out, std error, and so on. Once if for all the log stream matching that tag, because it's been tagged at the beginning, it's been tagged over here. So then if you match with this match here, you can see that we are removing the row in front of it. We are renaming the message into log, the stream into stream. We are doing multi-line ingestions, and we're putting some limits. We then filter some few things. We add the Kubernetes metadata to that one, and then we also add more details. So for instance, we're adding the Kubernetes cluster ID. We need it to register properly the information in Dynatrace. So there are a few, you can see dimensions related to Dynatrace that we are grabbing automatically through these sections. And last, the only thing I do here is I'm sending over the log stream to Dynatrace. So very simple pipeline.
Then I would like to explain how to chain Fluentbit and Fluentd using the forward plugin. So at the end, we will have two distinct pipelines in this exercise. One with Fluentbit. So Fluentbit will be there to collect the logs from Kubernetes, parse it, and then it will just forward it back to Fluentd. The Fluentd pipeline will receive the log stream from Fluentbit and just forward it to Dynatrace. So this is just an example to show you that you can chain both technologies.
All right, so now last section of this tutorial is we're going to deploy Fluentbit. So to do that, we will have, of course, to delete our Fluentd deployment that was basically collecting everything. We will deploy a slightly different one. So first thing we need to do is to create the following line. So let's create first. Let me grab this kubectl create namespace. Let's create a namespace for logging. So namespace has been created. Now let's apply the three files that will create the cluster role, the service account, and last the cluster role binding. So those have been done. All right, now those have been deleted. Now what we need now is to also we have a new deployment file in this repo. So let me show you the file that I'm referring to. So there is a dedicated Fluentbit folder in the repo, and so there's two things. There is the manifest for Fluentbit that will include, of course, the the pipeline for Fluentd. So of course we need to update it to point to the right cluster ID and everything. So the pipeline is a bit different. So I just collect the stream coming from the forward, and then I do the rest piece, the rest of the pipeline where I add the stuff. So basically, from the difference between the two others, I just collect from Fluentbit and the first piece where I was just the source, and the rest is on the Fluentd. So let me show you now the Fluentbit. So the Fluentbit, you can see here, there is few set sections. So I'm collecting I'm collecting the logs from Kubernetes. It's been tagged. And then I add few stuff there with the API, and I forward it to the service. So here, Fluentd logging Dynatrace, because it's in the Dynatrace namespace SVC. So I'm referring to the service related to the Fluentd new deployment. So let's update the two deployment files. At least the one with Fluentd, because we need those, and then we could apply the Fluentd manifest because it needs to be running, and next the Fluentbit. So let me update the file first. The file has been updated, so now I can reapply. In the Fluentbit, in that case now Fluentbit, and I'm gonna deploy the Fluentd manifest with Fluentbit. All right, now those has been created. Last, I need to deploy, of course, Fluentbit. So that's in one cluster, but you can obviously imagine a use case where you have multi-clusters and where you chain those this process. All right, now let's have a look at what we have in terms of pods first in Dynatrace namespace. So we have those three. Let's see what we got in terms. Let's see also the service, because we remember I'm referring to services. Maybe I want to make sure that I'm not doing any bad. Fluentd logging is there, so it's marked fine, and I have the port 2024 opened. Now let's take one of those container just to see the logs. All right, so there's no patterns coming in, nothing match, nothing coming. Let's see that everything is running. So kubectl get first this SVC, the service in Dynatrace namespace. So that will be our Fluentbit law service. So it's listening. Let's now see the pods in the Dynatrace namespace. So Fluentd is running. I don't know if I'm receiving anything, but let's see in the pods running in the logging namespace. So we have a couple of pods. Let's see. The logs coming from this one. All right, so I can keep it -F to see things, but yeah, there's a pause coming in. Again, potentially that pipeline is not accurate, but I wanted to take an example. So the idea, keep in mind that, yeah, you can definitely chain one Fluentbit and one Fluentd together with the help of forward. Forward is a way of communicating those two solutions between each other, or even just Fluentd to Fluentd or Fluentbit to Fluentbit.
That's it for today's episode related to Fluentd. So in today's episode, we try to do two exercises in the tutorial. One, collecting logs in your cluster with Fluentd and forward it back to Dynatrace. So you also saw how to install an ActiveGate within your cluster. And second exercise, where we was focusing on how to chain Fluentbit and Fluentd. So Fluentbit was collecting logs, forwarding it back to Fluentd, and Fluentd was just sending it to Dynatrace. So the idea is, again, keep in mind that Fluentd has more plugins, so you may need to chain sometimes those two products together to have an efficient log stream pipeline. All right, so if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We will produce more episodes on next coming weeks. And if you have any topic in mind that you would like us to cover, let me know through LinkedIn, Twitter, or even YouTube if there is a specific topic that you would like us to cover. All right, so thanks for watching and see you soon for another episode. Bye.